I'm Tony Ruiz, contributing editor at Gold Derby, here with Chad Galster, the editor of 1923. And Chad, this series is so different from, in my opinion, from some of the other stuff in the quote unquote Yellowstone universe, in that you're really balancing two separate stories in two completely different locations and blending them together into a
Mhm.
coherent narrative. So, what kind of challenge does that present from just an editing standpoint?
I mean, just from an editing standpoint, there are a lot of challenges geographically based on like when footage was coming in. We had units shooting in Africa, we had units shooting in Montana, and trying to manage all of that and just getting just something simple like getting media in from location was a big challenge for us. But from a story standpoint, you're trying to keep the audience engaged in both stories, right? And you know that at some point these stories are going to collide. They didn't even actually collide by the end of what we're calling season one, which is the end of episode 8. Everyone, I think, was hoping or expecting Spencer to end up in Montana. He didn't quite get there. But it's feeling connected to two stories, getting people to invest emotionally in two different stories, and knowing that like the payoff is a long one to come. So what people are really wanting to see out of this series, I think, is going to come in season 2 or in part 2, as we sort of refer to it. So but aside from that, like both of the stories in my mind were incredibly interesting, fantastic characters, and really world-class actors. So it wasn't actually that hard. It was just something that we're constantly aware of, is balancing when we're going to show how much of Spencer's story we reveal per episode and how much of Jacob and Kara and the rest of the crew in Montana.
So, how much of that is dictated by the script, and how much is dictated by in the editing room?
Mm-hmm. Because it's Taylor, almost 100% of it is scripted. He has a very specific vision. The word gets thrown around a lot, but he actually has it. Just exactly how he wants this to be presented and how he wants the story to unfold. And because he's such a damn gifted writer, he knows how to pace it out the right way. I mean, there are things that happen in 1923 that might come out of the edit room in any other story. Even something that we did in 1883, which is like starting it, flash forwarding a little bit to start the story, then we go back. I mean, in 1883, we flash forward to something that doesn't pay off until episode 9. In 1923, Kara shooting that guy pays off in episode 3. At least you understand what's happening. So all of that is very much by design, and it's all about teasing out information, teasing out bits of these stories and these characters in a way that Taylor's mantra, if you will, is take it away. Just always just trying to reveal as little as possible, because it just makes your audience want the information so much more, and I think it goes to their engagement of the story. So he has a real knack for that, and we're just trying not to screw it up in the edit.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that I always find really interesting is for somebody like Taylor, who is so hands-on with the show and writes so much. And so how much of the collaboration, what is the collaboration like between the two of you as you're starting to put the show together?
Yeah, one of the benefits, I've been with Taylor since Yellowstone season 1, and so the benefit of any long-term collaborative relationship, or any relationship really, it could be a relationship with your wife, husband, a good friend. There's more unspoken as time goes on, right? You just don't need to communicate as much. So one of the reasons that Taylor and I have been successful working together is because I already see movies and TV largely the way he does. I mean, I was a fan of his writing before I ever met him, and then we figured out pretty quickly that I put stuff together in a way that he likes, and so that only as the years go by, that only strengthens, and that connection gets deeper, and there's more history to it. And I've solved edit problems, production problems in a way that he likes. You learn lessons from doing that, so that the next time a problem presents itself in a similar way, I can solve it without even speaking to him. My goal when I give him a cut and when I take a cut to him is that it's 90 to 95% of the way there already, and then he and I can sit together and hammer out the rest. And that's what we do. We did it last week. So there's always going to be something. There's always going to be an irreplaceable in-person part of this work. Being an editor and him being the writer, showrunner, and everything to these shows. But yeah, I can move it along really far without any input from him whatsoever, and that frees him up because he is such a busy guy. He's writing however many. God, I don't even know how many TV shows we have going at this point. I sort of forget. But he has so many other things to do. So part of what I can do to help him with that is to make the edit go as smoothly as possible and present to him something that he likes, and then we just kind of hammer out the details.
So how when you're confronted with this hours and hours and hours of footage, and
Yeah.
so when you're kind of putting an episode together and cutting an episode together, um, do you find yourself being, have you found over the years, and especially working with Taylor, have you found being drawn to a certain structure, a certain way to put things together? Does it just kind of come based on instinct and experience?
Instinct and experience is what comes to mind. I think that I try to avoid getting into rhythms and patterns and putting his stuff together. And it's an easy thing to do if you're not careful, especially shows, like Yellowstone. We've been going for 5 seasons, however many episodes, and you can fall into a rhythm and a way to put that show together that feels comfortable. I think at that point, the minute you start doing that, you stop growing as a show, as an individual, and your show begins to die. So it's really important to me to keep finding different ways to put things together in a way that I haven't done or that he hasn't seen, using sound in different ways that we haven't tried before. So, so yes, I guess the way to answer it is that if I find myself doing that, and I have from time to time, I immediately have to stop and force myself to do something else, or get away from a scene and come back to it with fresh eyes later on, so that I don't get too comfortable and too pleased with myself in feeling that I have everything figured out. I think that you never want your shows, your stories to be predictable. You don't want your editorial style to be predictable, and so I have to keep myself guessing so that I can keep my audience guessing. Is a way to say that, I guess.
I think there's always this kind of like misconception about like, oh, the hardest job for an editor is, the big action set pieces. And I'm
Mm.
wondering, I've had some editors tell me that those are actually sometimes easier to
Hmm.
do than some of the more maybe quiet moments. Where do you kind of come
Yeah,
down in that?
very much so. I mean, they're so specifically shot. I mean, you open up a bin, for an action sequence, and you might have 30 or 40 setups in it. So visually, it looks intimidating. But a lot of those setups are for like 18 frames of action, like a guy grabs a gun or shoots something, and then you're on to the next setup. And so you can actually get through that material very quickly. The other thing about an action sequence, if it's done well, and our folks are I humbly say, I think we have some of the best that do it. The pace and the rhythm and the choreography of the action sequence becomes very clear, and so really you're just trying to find little moments, selects for each beat of the action sequence, and you can actually do that part kind of on autopilot, right? It's like, oh, he's got to pick up the gun, this car crashes here, or this wagon explodes here, what have you. And then you can just build out those selects and then start crafting into a scene. When you're trying to find when you're dealing with people that are talking about something emotional, life and death, or whether or not they love each other anymore, or whether something that their child has done. I mean, gosh, that's hard. That's hard because it's your audience has an experience of those things, right? They have relationships that they've been in. They'll watch the scene and they will decide for themselves whether they believe you being the TV show, whether they believe the actors. And so the goal is to help the actors, help the script be as believable as possible to someone that has a frame of reference for what they're talking about. In an action sequence, most of us have never been in a shootout. I don't ever plan to be in one, or a car chase, hopefully. So we can tell them what that looks like, and they just are hopefully along for the ride and the enjoyment of it. But man, when you're dealing with the real stuff, the real things that people go through in their lives, and those conversations, far more difficult and requires, in my mind, far more precision.
Do you find yourself getting caught up in some of the emotional scenes? I mean, you sometimes have to watch the same scene over and over and over again from a variety of different, point of views and shots and things like that. And I'm wondering, do you ever find yourself kind of getting lost in the actual drama? Or are you able to kind of have a professional distance from that?
When I'm putting it together, it is quite easy not to get lost in it because there's a mechanical aspect to it. You see someone, action, cut, all of that. You see, the immediate moments before and after the take with the actors as the cameras find their positions. When I've done my job well, um, when I know that I've done my job well, is when I actually watch the cut of it or watch the show when I've put the entire show together. And if something makes me cry, then I feel like I've really done my job properly. So it's not, you're trying to, it's a weird job. Being an editor is a weird job. It's a very left brain, right brain job. There's a very mechanical, precise aspect to it. And there's also what you're trying to do is put emotional truth on television for people, right? So that requires an understanding of people and what makes them tick and their mannerisms and all sorts of different things. So you've got to have both of those things, I think, to do it really well, especially with the kind of stories that Taylor tells. So you do the math part first and get the story together, and you're looking, what is this reaction here from this person? What is something that Helen Mirren says that properly motivates something that Harrison Ford says? It's like sort of a math problem. And then you watch it and you find, like, do I believe these people? Do I believe what they're saying to each other? Do I believe what they're talking about? And then putting my own frame of reference into it. Is that something that I've felt before? And then I can allow myself to get emotionally engaged. If I find myself, I've put a show together and I have no emotional engagement with it, then something's wrong. And I have to go back and look at why that is and try to find different performances or what have you. So you kind of got to do it from every side in this job. Very strange thing when I actually start to talk about it, but it makes sense to me in the moment when I'm doing it, I guess.
Well, but again, one of the things I find interesting is that you have a background. You've done a lot of reality shows in the course of your career, and I'm curious if you see a marked difference in terms of how you approach something, say for like a reality or even from a more entertaining perspective versus like kind of this serious drama. Do you see them differently, or do you approach them exactly the same way?
Exactly the same way. It's all storytelling. It's all storytelling, and that's the folks that haven't done reality or documentary. And I've said this many times. Every editor should have to do one or both of those things, because what you realize very quickly is that your audience wants the same thing from you. They want to be able to watch a story. I did The Bachelor for many years, and that's kind of the main thing that if I'm known for one thing in reality, it is sort of that. So what people want to see when they watch The Bachelor, they want to see people fall in love. They want to see people get angry with each other. They want to see betrayal and excitement and all these things. They want to see the exact same things that they see out of a scripted show. Now, the difference is that I might have a dinner conversation in a reality show where two people talk for 4 hours. And I've got to make an 8-minute scene out of that feels like it was scripted, that has the same emotional beats, has the same rise and fall, the same character arcs. So it takes a skill. You become a writer. There's a reason why the WGA tried to organize reality editors years ago. It didn't end up working out. We're all in IATSE, but there was a logical reason for that, because you become the writer and the storyteller as you're doing that. I remember there was a breakup, just a heart-wrenching breakup in The Bachelorette a few years ago, and these people, it took them 6 hours to break up, and I had again 8 to 10 minutes to tell that story, and I had to honor what the specific conflicts were that led to their breakup and try to make that something that was cohesive and that had a rise and a fall. And you got to make people cry, just like they want to cry when they watch a scripted show. So no, long story short, it's all storytelling. Your stories about people. You're trying to have your audience relate to what's happening on the screen. So it does not matter to me whether it's a reality show or a scripted drama. The goal is the same. The desire for connection that your audience has is the same. And so I approach them the same way. They have there's a different level of prestige, I guess you could say, from one to the other. But I loved all those years, and I worked with really, really smart people, and I'm very proud of my reality background. and it served me well over the years. It really did.
Well, one of the things that I think is so amazing about all of these shows in the quote unquote Yellowstone universe is that they are all of a type, and yet they are all so tonally and dramatically different. They have different feels, they have a different energy to them.
Yeah.
And it always makes me wonder what it is about Taylor as a storyteller that he's able to craft these shows that are all of a universe and yet make them feel so their own thing.
I am in awe of it, and I don't know. I will say that it's been we've those of us that have worked with him for a long time, sometimes we'll kind of try to figure it out. Ben Richardson, who directed the vast majority of the 1923, is a good friend. I've worked with him now with Taylor's stuff for many years. He said he rather succinctly summed it up by saying Taylor just writes the human condition really well, and it's actually a really good way to say it. He has an understanding he can place himself inside the emotional drama and experience of other people in a way that's just not common. So he writes these characters that you relate to in extraordinary historical environments or even modern day situations. So I don't know. I wish I knew. I think if anyone could figure it out, we'd all try to do it, right? Instead, I'm happy to be able to see to see the results of his work. Like he'll write something and I'll read it like, good Lord, how did you come up with this? Like what led to this? And if you ask him, he will say he doesn't know. I mean, he will, and I think I believe him when I say that. He's like, I don't know, it just comes to me and I write it. But how else would you explain it if you were that person? I think it's sort of like, I don't, on a different level, I don't know why I know how to do this job really well. I just know that I do, and it makes sense to me. And I don't know that I could teach it. I've tried, and I enjoy teaching. I enjoy talking to college kids. I get asked to do that from time to time, and I end up talking to them more about work ethic than actually the mechanics of being an editor. Same way, I think for him, he would talk to you about like work ethic or what his life is like, maybe. But it's really hard to teach those things, and they come from somewhere very special. And it is a thing that I am really thrilled to get to see every day. I don't have a much better answer than that.
I don't think you need a better answer than that. I think that's perfect. Chad, thank you so much. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders throughout Emmy season. Chad Galster from 1923. Geez, I get them all confused.
We all do.
From the Taylor Sheridan universe. Thank you so much, Chad.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you.